Welcome to Picture the Professor, the sports betting show brought to you by a real statistic professor. Cousin Jared, we are here for week 3 of the 2025 college football season. The return of the slides. Finally figured out how to do the new recording interface with some slides. So we're starting off hot with it. I should have like an intro slide, shouldn't I? Like a pretty graphic or something.
Yeah, no, baby steps. You don't want to overdo it.
We don't. Yeah, they'll be better next week probably. But look, we come in hot, right? We don't waste time. We come right in with it. And we wanted to just start off, a lot of people here, watch maybe for the first time and really just set the stage as to what we're going to do here in this show for college football betting. If any of this applies to you, this show might be for you. A lot of people out there constantly reloading their betting accounts. How do you not do that? How do you stay above water? How do people actually beat the books, right? How do you get a part of a good community? How do you stop? Because we were talking about this the other day. Isn't it funny that all the things that the sports books advertise on their commercials are all of the things that are like, you and I know are the traps? Yeah. And it's like, how do you stop? How do you do that for a little bit of fun? How do you actually just stop chasing that stuff and figure out how to win money? And we say, well, we just want to set the stage and say, that's what we're going to try to talk about here. We don't know what's going to happen every single game. We're not giving you hot takes. We're giving you probabilities that help us win more when we win than we lose when we lose. And that's really the bottom line here. Player-based model, every number reflects today's roster. Already starting to see some injuries. And of course, because you got to love college football, sometimes you end up showing up Saturday and there's more injuries that you can't even try. We do the best we can with the injuries, folks.
Yep.
And it's just kind of the way it goes. But 100 is average, higher equals more scoring. You'll notice that here when we discuss the grades. One game is random, but the model wins in the long run. And that's kind of why I said we're not about hot takes here. We're going to get a lot of things really wrong and a lot of things really right. And that's not really the point about the one game. It's about more right than wrong. Because Jared, I was thinking about this too. In baseball, we talk about the one-score games. And it's kind of like, take away the one-score games. Take away the extra inning games. How do you do in the rest of them? Because that stuff's going to fall. In college football, it's turnovers. Is kind of a big one. Special teams play.
Yep.
Take out those random things like that and just say the games that were just kind of clear, how'd you do? And that's kind of what we're talking about. But you got to look at the bigger set of data here and that. Even sharp plays will lose almost half the time. So, folks, we're going to have a lot of picks, again, that are wrong. That's okay. But by getting the right price, the right value, and not falling for traps like locks. Remember, folks, there's no such thing as a lock in sports betting. Again, you can win more when you win than you lose when you lose. Cousin Jared, for people who want to be a part of that, to you, is the bigger benefit really all of the detailed breakdowns or the Discord chat? I go back and forth. Which one's the bigger benefit? What do you think?
I think it's probably the Discord stuff because, sometimes you just need validation for what you're doing, or somebody to, bounce ideas off of or tell you that you're crazy. And so you can gather information lots of places. Of course, I think the way that you've done the information and it's here, I think it's presented really well. It's concise, gives you everything you need. So definitely join because of the data too, but also the Discord access, being able to interact with the group. You just need somebody to tell you that, you've got your head on straight. So I think it's valuable.
Yeah, very, very well said. Exact price cutoffs, exact, probabilities that are not about they're perfectly right, but about saying, if the model were right, here's where the value stops. And so it just gives you an anchor point to say, that's the number I'm looking at. Now you can then look at it and say, I think the model might be, I'm a little bit more nervous than the model is, so I actually need a little bit more of value, right? Because you talk about that all the time. Or you might say, I think it might be, I don't even need that much value, right? But you get an anchor point, so you're not guessing about that.
Yep.
That Discord chat that you talked about there, again, you got other people in there giving out winning picks for WNBA, NFL already started off great in week 1. And that's just super valuable there. And you get all this, folks, for less than a nice lunch, especially with inflation. The lunch prices are going up. And so you can get all that. Link in the show description. So sign up today. Don't delay you. There's also the free kind of daily bonus pick there that we've been giving out. Been doing great in baseball as well. Baseball's still rolling along here in September. Had another winning week last week. So a lot of great things over there on Patreon. You can get that link again in the show description. Sign up for free, if nothing else, to get an extra free pick each day. But the last thing real quick I want to talk about here, because Jared, we're kind of going to turn into a little bit of a Substack here. I mean, you're writing 2 columns a week.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's making me want to write some columns too. Get in the
Yeah.
game and let's give out some more written content.
Yeah. Yeah. And, go in. If you join us on Patreon, go in there, comment on my posts. I'll be watching, make sure to answer any questions you have, or, just start some discussion amongst yourself. Yeah, it's been fun writing so far. Definitely have enjoyed it. So hope that y'all enjoy it as well. And if you're interested, go join us on Patreon and see what I've written so far.
Yes, it's been some great reads. I have a couple of issues with some of the things you've written about my Baylor Bears.
Well, good, because we're going to talk about that at the top of the show, so we can
Oh
get into
boy.
that very quickly.
Oh boy. To recap last week, hasn't gone great for us so far this year, because I do want to remind people that, again, it's in the long run. You can see there on screen what we did in 2023, 2024. 50 to 75% bankroll increases over the whole season, assuming your units are 2% of your bankroll, folks. You probably should be keeping that more like 1, but I know a lot of people probably overextend themselves a little bit. So just kind of going with, some people do higher than that. You shouldn't, people, but if you do, I guess that's between you and your bankroll and your own your own situation. But if we say 2% there, people are doing really great with the bankroll. Not a great start to the season for us. The A grades did do well last week. I did look at this though last year. Our ROI on our picks versus the A grades was 2.5 times higher. So in general, we do a great job when we ignore A grades and when we select a few B grades, which is kind of our MO. Did it work for us last week? Last week, 15, 18, and 1 overall for the season now, almost down 10 units, but we got a long way to go. Would not be the first time we've started off. Again, like I mentioned last week, winning and then losing, or losing and then winning, you never really know how it goes in this early season. This is the first year we lost both weeks 1 and 2 in these last 3. Maybe next year we'll hit the full 4, yeah, the quad box, and we'll win both the first 2 weeks. Who knows? But because Jared, I don't think we suddenly forgot how to pick them. I think it's just been some unfortunate events, as I guess how I'll put it.
And you've been referencing the first few weeks of the season. There have been plenty of times in the middle of the season we've gone on a dry spell in the middle of the season. There has always been a couple week period where 2 or 3 weeks, a month maybe, where things haven't gone well. So no, I am not concerned. And I think where we really, I don't want to say do our best, but this is a player based model. So as injuries pile up, you get to bowl season, you get opt outs and everything. That's where sideline can really do some of its work. So no concerns at all so far.
Yeah, that's kind of where I was last week, week 2 of the college football season. Because let's start off with the good, the bad, and the ugly. What struck you as good here this last week?
So I usually don't like to give away what's in the articles that I write. It feels like if you want to, know what's in the article, go join over on Patreon and read it. But this one was too good not to. I don't know if anybody saw or read about what happened at the end of the Ole Miss Kentucky game, where Kentucky kicked a meaningless field goal. Well, not meaningless to some, but meaningless to
not
the
meaningless
outcome
to
of
us.
the game. Yeah. For the outcome of it was meaningless to the outcome of the game. Ole Miss was up by 10. Kentucky kind of kicked a field goal right as time was expiring. It got Kentucky the cover, and it hit the over for the number that things closed at there. And so not only that Mark Stoops was, because it was obvious kind of what was happening. So number one, that Lane Kiffin has competition now for the coach most likely to do something at the end of the game to make sure his team covers. But then maybe the best part of it was in the post-game interview, Lane Kiffin's like, yeah, I'm sorry to everybody who backed us. I thought we had the cover. He didn't say that exactly. He said, I'm sorry to the people who backed us. He did not say, I thought we had the cover in the bag.
But I mean, he said it without saying it.
Yes,
There's some unspoken words there for sure.
Yeah, but Kiffin basically said, for those who backed us, we thought we had it in the bag. I'm sorry. And I was like, you know what? We've talked about this plenty on this show, that Lane Kiffin is like the guy that we know is aware of what the numbers are. And he just solidified it. So, Lane Kiffin has our back, folks. So anytime that you're backing Ole Miss, you can feel good knowing that Kiffin has that in mind as well.
Yeah, I would have called that the ugly for us since we gave out the under, and I believe I could be completely wrong, but I believe that number dropped at least 3 points from when we gave it out. I believe the game had already gone over the closing number, but had still stayed under the number we gave out, and a lot of our people I know took earlier in the week, and so
Yep.
even for me and my personal betting, it was that number mattered because we got the great value.
Yep.
And that's the
Yep.
thing is we try to identify where the value is, and we had the value, and then that happened. And I will counter and say a little bit to that. I do think that as we get more analytically inclined as a sport, I do think we're going to see more things like that because the smart decision is kick the field goal and go for the onside kick, even
That's
if you
true.
know you're
That's
not going
true.
to win.
Yeah.
And that's going to lead to more situations like this. So I think it's just going to be some hand wringing there. For me, it was UConn. Coming off of a 1-11 season a few years ago, getting Jim Mora, making that bowl game, losing that bowl game, but getting to 6 wins a couple years ago. A rough year last year, or 2 years ago, but then last year, 9-4 beats UNC in that bowl game. Last year they lost to Syracuse by 7 on the road. This year they took them to overtime and lost by 7 as well. I'm not going to say they're heading for another 9-4 season, another bowl win, but they look just as good as they did last year. And the model has them rated above average, which, because in Jordan, we first started sideline ratings several years ago, UConn was consistently in the basement with UMass. They were the punching bags with a few other teams, and UMass, poor things, haven't really escaped, but UConn has and is now above the average team in sideline. I mean, that's just a heartwarming story to see a program that's been so bad for so long, it seems. We're, getting some competency there. And so I thought that was good. They couldn't quite pull off the win, but an impressive showing at
Well,
Syracuse
hey,
nonetheless.
as I told my mother-in-law 2 weeks ago, good teams win, great teams cover. So
And there you go. They got the cover.
Yeah, they got the cover. That's all that matters.
That's all that matters. Isn't Jared bad? What was bad for you?
Man, what's happening to Kansas State? And this is partly me in my preseason rankings. I had Kansas State number 11, and my rationale was basically Kansas State is the team that I trust the most out of all of these teams that I feel like were kind of grouped together, basically 10 through 25 in college football this season. And I could not have been more wrong. Definitely felt like the close game with North Dakota last week, you could at least somewhat rationalize in that letdown spot coming off a conference game, travel to Ireland. Like you probably could have said that game would have been closer than you would have expected. But
And I think we mentioned this last week. Like Iowa State played really well coming back, but also each team's different, and so I wasn't going to hold that against them to be like just because their opponent did well in that situation, that's a tough situation, and that they
Yep.
didn't doesn't. That's I'm like you. Like we could give them a pass for that.
Yep. And Army losing to the Army team that lost so much production from last year, and you just really needed your offense to do anything in the second half of that game, and they would have won. But just Army's defense was able to completely shut down Kansas State's offense towards the end of that game. So yeah, it's not pretty for Kansas State. And we talk about this. I'm sure Kansas State will figure it out. They will play better, but the
Well
Big 12
they'll figure it out.
yeah, but the Big 12 is one of those conferences that you mess around too much and you're going to find yourself way at the bottom because there are teams that can beat you every single week. So
yeah, there's only a few gimmies in that conference. There's fewer gimmies in the Big 12 than there is the Big 10 and the SEC, which is crazy because those two conferences are so much better at the top.
Yep.
But the bottom of the Big 12 is really strong. And I haven't looked at their schedule specifically, but we talk about this all the time. The way the schedule shapes up in any of these conferences now with 16 games, you can kind of be set up for if things go right, good things can happen, or you can be set up the opposite way real quick where things can just turn on a dime. And so, yeah, a lot of things to be concerned about there in Manhattan, Kansas. Army the previous week needed 2 overtimes
and
against
lost.
Tarleton
And lost to Tarleton. Yeah, and lost to Tarleton.
So now Kansas State maybe should have lost to an FCS school and then lost to a school that did lose to an FCS school. I mean, that's 2 really rough data points. The model's noticed and has given them a hit, as well as it's kind of giving Iowa State and Iowa a little bit of a hit too, because it's like maybe all those teams aren't quite as good as we thought. Yeah. Although I think maybe no team is as good as we thought, and we'll talk about that later as well. For me, it's Penn State, one of the top teams coming in. Everyone kind of said it was, the Big Ten was Penn State's to lose. This was their year. Drew Aller, first round draft pick. And because what's gone on with them? They haven't looked that impressive. What's going on?
Well, and I wrote this last week, and the things I predicted that Penn State would not cover that game against Nevada. I don't think I didn't mention anything about them this week. They're playing Florida International. They ended up winning 34-0. But this does not surprise me for the non-conference games for Penn State, because this year, and I wrote about this in the preseason, the expectations on Penn State this year are cool. Ohio State losing so much production from last season, Michigan kind of, on its way back up. Not quite there yet, though. Oregon losing so much on offense. It was really felt like Penn State's year to win the Big 12. And I think that, especially with the transfer portal, which can take away some of the depth from some of these really top line teams, I think for the non-conference games, especially the non-conference games that Penn State has scheduled, they just want to get out of there, put nothing on tape, keep everybody healthy. It's not about, in previous years, Penn State needed style points. But this year, Penn State just needs to stay healthy in the conference play, and that's it. So I think that's what you're seeing with Penn State, is it's more of just, hey, let's win these games, get them out of the way, and focus on what really matters.
The model has Penn State all the way down to 13th, which is just mind-blowing. Now, I will say that the gap between Oregon at 4 and Penn State at 13 is about one. Actually, the gap between Ole Miss at 5 and Penn State at 13 is one field goal. There are a bunch of teams right there. So the fact that Penn State's at the very bottom of that is more so a reflection of they haven't looked that impressive, and we have to utilize the data that we are given in order to assess the teams. We can't just go off of, well, we don't think they're trying, because I don't know how to model that appropriately.
Right.
But it is such a small gap there that if Penn State were to go out there and had they gone full firepower, it probably would be about a field goal higher, and they'd be ranked 5th, and everybody would say, oh yeah, sure, they're 5th. But it's like, it's really not a big difference. Or the big difference comes after the top 3, where there is a monumental gap, and we will discuss that later as well. Cousin Jared the Ugly, what was the ugliest thing that sticks out to you from week 2?
I'm kind of twisting this to fit my own narrative, but I'd say the thing that was ugly was Baylor's defense, and maybe Coach Aranda's fourth down decision making. But I actually think that Baylor can parlay that into a positive thing, because I think clearly the two best teams in the Big 12, and I do have a mea culpa here for Iowa State. When I wrote my article this weekend, I said that, in my opinion, Utah is the favorite in the Big 12. I think you could put Iowa State in that category as well. Kind of two peas in a pod. Those two teams, run first, defensive oriented teams, not going to beat themselves. I think Baylor, if they're just going to go back and play circa 2008 Big 12 football with no defense and have your quarterback throw for 450 yards and 6 touchdowns every game, I think they have a chance to rock the boat in the Big 12, because they can make, specifically those two teams, Iowa State and Utah, really uncomfortable, I think, in a potential matchup in a conference championship game. So Baylor's defense is ugly. Obviously, can't say anything bad about the offense. And I think they have proven to be dynamic enough offensively to cause some problems to those top teams in the Big 12.
Sawyer Robertson looks legit. As a Baylor fan, I really enjoy watching the offense. My gripes with Aranda are he's a defensive guru, and what is happening on defense?
Yeah.
And he gave up all of the offensive stuff last year, and the offense started taking off. And it's like, what's your point here? Like, what are you doing here?
Right.
But you're right, the offense is going to be a unique fit for a couple of these teams. Of note, Utah, the highest rated Big 12 team at the moment. There are multiple Big 12 teams between them and Iowa State, actually, according to Sideline, Iowa State, and then Baylor right behind that. The teams, Cousin Jared, that you are, quote unquote, I'm going to say insulting here, Kansas, Texas Tech, BYU, and TCU are all teams that get rated in that mix as well. They all have their flaws. I will say the
Yeah.
bar was a little bit lower on Iowa State because when you look at what Iowa State did against Kansas State, that takes it down. If Kansas State had
Yeah.
been legit, I think Iowa State's probably ranked second. But I think the
Mm.
fact that Kansas State looks so poor and we're so early on in the season, I think the model's kind of penalizing Iowa State there and dropping them maybe below a couple teams that Iowa State would probably be favored against on a neutral field, I would assume.
Yeah, and I would say I want to see TCU play somebody that's not North Carolina. So that was after our last show that we did. But yeah, come back and talk to me in TCU. It's easy to forget only a couple of years removed from a national championship game appearance for TCU.
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
I could be accused of overlooking TCU. So we'll circle back on that in a couple of weeks and see what we think.
I kind of forget about that because of how ugly that game was.
Yeah.
Then the next year, I think TCU won like 6 games.
Yeah.
And so it was one of those things where it's such a weird situation. Yep. For me, the ugliest thing I saw, and this isn't, I saw a lot of ugly things, of course, over the weekend, but I want to point out something that nobody saw because it happened at 3 a.m. Eastern. I fell asleep during the Hawaii Sam Houston State game. Woke up just in time to see things completely fall apart. Sam Houston on their third string quarterback drives the length of the field and gets down 7 with 6 minutes to go. And we've got the cover looking great to wrap up and salvage the weekend a little bit there. And they have a penalty and unsportsmanlike on the coach who just yapped all after the touchdown. Phil Longo there. And 2 plays later, Hawaii's in the red zone. 2 plays later, I think they score. They're down 14, and all of a sudden, Sam Houston's got the ball back. They just shoved it right down their throat. And folks, this is what I want to talk about here because this has never happened in the history of football, something I witnessed that we have asked. Because I've asked for this from the football gods, from the gambling gods, millions of times. It has never happened. It's 4th down. An overthrown pass. The ref throws the flag for pass interference. They talk about it, and the ref comes back and says the pass was uncatchable, so there's no flag for pass interference. Never in the history of football, in college football, has to happen. In the NFL, every once in a while you see that. In college football, it's been the running joke between me and my dad. There's no such thing as an uncatchable pass. If the ref throws his flag, he means for that flag to be thrown. It doesn't matter what is said. He's not picking it up because he threw the flag. And the number of times I'm like, what does uncatchable even mean? Because there's balls 10 feet over the receiver's head. Like, there's literally no way. And this was one of those. It shouldn't have been a flag. But I'm thinking the first time this ever happens, and that would have been huge for us to get the first down. That would have been their first down. That first down of those late drives is so key. Then Hawaii ends up kicking a field goal, and we don't even say
that was tough. Honorable mention for ugly for the weekend. We talked a little bit about UMass. We were talking about UConn. UMass lost to Bryant 27-6. Eastern Michigan lost to Long Island 28.
Eastern Michigan,
20.
Took a tumbling in the ratings.
Akron put up 0 points and gave up 68 to Nebraska. Not a good weekend for the bottom half of the MAC.
I will say yes. And Ball State all of a sudden now finds themselves in the bottom of the rankings as well, like with the Kent States and Akron. At the beginning of the season, it was Kent State and Akron.
Yeah.
And Sideline said Akron was worse than Kent State. I think now it's flipped. And I'm like, how did that flip after Akron scored 0 points?
And gave up 68. Yeah.
But the model is those 2 teams are just back and forth horse racing for the last team, and then now Ball State's joining them, and then the Eastern Michigan one. I thought, man, and we were just talking about how Florida just destroyed Long Island.
How bad Long Island was,
And this is why we can't use the transitive property too much because we would not say that Florida is like 90 points better than Eastern Michigan because that would imply that South Florida is 90 points better than Eastern Michigan. If those 2 teams play tomorrow, give me Eastern Michigan plus 90 for all of the money that I could ever get my hands on. We'll talk more about Florida and South Florida later in the show. And so we've been yapping long enough about week 2. We'll get to week 3, but real quick, if you want those extra benefits, folks, I put this here at the start. Otherwise, I'll forget and I'll try to transition to the next game. But this is the detailed information you get on Patreon for from Sideline for all these games. We're going to start off here with Clemson at Georgia Tech. Folks, we're not going to start off with the games of the week. We're going to start off with an old segment. I don't even remember what we called, but it was something about Clemson.
Talk me out of Clemson.
Talk Me Out of Clemson was our
Yeah.
segment from a few years ago that I finally figured out Clemson, and I figured out when to back them, how to
Yeah.
zigzag. It was an amazing run, and we had a lot of fun with that segment. And so we're gonna go back into that here. Because Jared, I'm concerned about Clemson. I think at the start of the season it was like we had some reasons for optimism.
Mm-hmm.
Cade Klubnik, we were optimistic about what he did last year. Last year's team was pretty solid. This year looks like we've gone backwards for Clemson. Sideline says that Georgia Tech wins this game half of the time, which coming into the season would have been absurd. Clemson, according to Sideline, ranked number 26. I mean, quite the tumble after quite the scare this last weekend. Because, Jared, we're getting, I believe, plus 145 on Georgia Tech for an A grade there.
At home.
What do you have to say about this one?
Okay, so my number one concern with Clemson is their seemingly inability to run the ball. And this goes back to, basically since Trevor Lawrence left, which, you would wonder Trevor Lawrence didn't really run the ball. Maybe it was just a specific threat that Trevor Lawrence had in passing the ball that, made them have to respect defenses have
also,
to respect.
Don't forget
more.
ETN was there and he's an NFL running back.
Yes, that is true. But just ever since that group left, they have not been able to run the ball, and they've tried all sorts of different ways, especially when DJU was there. They tried the quarterback running game quite a bit, kind of between the tackles. That didn't work out. So that's kind of my number one issue because, Clemson the past few years has not had the athletes to where if you make them one-dimensional, they are not going to be able to punish you the way they did maybe 10 years ago. They just don't quite have that level of athlete right now. For Georgia Tech, I know some people might be surprised on how high Sideline is on Georgia Tech, but I think we said this before the Colorado game this season. Haynes King, if he can stay healthy. I mean, Georgia Tech's offense has been good, and they will be able to stay in these games. At any moment, check the box score. See if the backup is playing for Georgia Tech. It's possible he gets hurt at any moment. He needs to be kept in bubble wrap. But, if Haynes King is playing, Georgia Tech's going to be able to hang in the game. So, yeah, I think this is a good play, especially, I'm kind of surprised getting this with Georgia Tech at home. Figured there'd be a little more respect for that road trip there. But, yeah, I like this Georgia Tech team if Haynes King is playing.
Yeah, and in that first game, right, we took Colorado plus odds, kind of just saying Georgia Tech's solid. Colorado's a tough place to play. It's a long trip.
Yep.
Who knows what's going to happen? And sure enough, who knew what was going to happen? It was kind of a tight ending. It didn't work out for us, but that's one of those things we talk about the long run. If we keep making that play, we keep ending up in these coin tossy type games with these plus odds. We're going to do well. And it's the same thing here now, just flipped, where it's like, hey, Georgia Tech's good enough to hang in there, just like Colorado was good enough to hang in there with them. And again, we're taking home teams, home dogs. Make a lot of sense here. We talk a lot early in the season about what should we overreact to, what shouldn't we overreact to, and we'll talk more about them later. But so far, great example: Florida State, Alabama. The model's saying yes, overreact to Florida State. They are actually really good. Don't overreact to Bama. Should we or not? You'll have to stay tuned to find out. Yeah. But that's one of the things the model is saying here is yes, overreact to Clemson. They aren't that good, and last year was kind of their peak. And then they aren't going to be as good this year. Georgia Tech was like this last year, kind of ranked in these 30s and 40s. It's like this isn't any different than where they've been lately. They've been a solid team.
And I think Georgia Tech is a great team to play on the money line in a spot like this because 100% Georgia Tech could lose this game by 2 touchdowns. But I think Georgia Tech also beat Miami last year. Like when they are on, they can beat any team in the ACC. So I think, sometimes we get questions about, taking the points versus the money line. I think Georgia Tech is a perfect money line candidate.
Yep, absolutely. That's a noon game. The noon game of the week here, Wisconsin and Alabama. Folks, we're talking about the total on this one. We're going to go under 46.5. Sideline says 41.8. Neither team projects to play with much pace. Alabama's offense looked really good against UL Monroe. That's UL Monroe. How much do we take from that? I'm not sure, except for the fact that when you dive deeper, some of the per play metrics in that game were better for Alabama than they've been in any of the Nick Saban offenses. And so it does give you a little bit of hope if you're an Alabama fan. Also gives you a little bit of hope they're playing this game at home because that's obviously where we have big concerns about what Alabama does when they look lost. Maybe just big concerns because Florida State's legit. I don't really know. There's a lot of questions still to be answered. But nevertheless, we don't have to worry about the side in this one. Alabama is a big favorite for a reason, and we're going to leave that alone, instead going under 46.5. A-grade play here. Cousin Jared, we'd love 47 and 48 as your two key numbers in the upper 40s. But our opinion is that getting the win on 41, 42, 44, 45
Yep.
gives us enough value to love this one.
Yep. I agree with that assessment there. I just cannot imagine a scenario where Wisconsin gets into a shootout. I mentioned this early in the season. You know, when are we going to start having a conversation about Luke Fickell at Wisconsin? Because this has certainly not materialized the way that I thought it would whenever he made the move there. He's, we talked about Phil Longo at Sam Houston now. He was of Wisconsin. That did not work out there on another offensive coordinator this year. Wisconsin they were slow getting going. Even, they had that week 1 game. I can't remember who they played now. But they won that game what was it, 17-0. We had the under 40.
It was some MAC school, I think.
Yeah, and that game had 20 points in it. They were slow getting started against Middle Tennessee State this past weekend. This is the same Middle Tennessee State that lost to Austin Peay by 20 points. This is not the college basketball show. This is still the college football show. And Wisconsin in that game, they had 2 guys that broke big runs, one run. And all the other guys that carried the ball, they had nobody that averaged more than 3.5 yards per carry. Wisconsin wants to be the team that runs the ball. That's one thing that's been clear, even though Barry Alvarez, I'm sure the ghost of Barry Alvarez, he's still alive. It's not his ghost, but I'm sure Barry Alvarez kind of still lingers over everything there. But they still are a run-first team, and they had trouble consistently running the ball against Middle Tennessee State. I just don't see it working out well for them. Alabama could win this game 38-0. Alabama could win this game 27-10. I just don't see very many ways that, this game ends up being, 28-20. I think that would kind of be an outlier.
Miami, Ohio was the MAC school that they played that low-scoring game at.
There you go.
Miami of Ohio, I believe, had a decent number of points last week in their game. So that just really goes to illustrate your point that it's more likely to be lower scoring than higher scoring. Yep. If nothing else. The model believes in Alabama, has them ranked number 3. We've got Texas and Ohio State kind of jockeying for number 1 and number 2. I really wanted to talk about the Ohio State pick that we have, but it didn't make the cut. I don't believe. I remember seeing that as the cut. So there's a pick on that if you want that. I think we will talk about the Texas one later. So I'll save my Texas and Ohio State take for later. That's your noon game of the week. Your middle afternoon game of the week, afternoon game of the week, your Georgia and Tennessee. Folks, we've got a wrong team favorite game here, the WTF slot. Doesn't always work, but Sideline says that Tennessee wins this 58% of the time, so we're going to take them plus 140 as an A-grade play. Because this also counts as a AA game, which we'll get to our AA segment later, where the model has an A-grade on both the side and the total. I do like the total pick. We will not give it away here, as that is exclusive to Patreon, but I do like the total pick as well. But the side here might make some sense. Georgia, maybe not quite as good as we thought. Tennessee might be a little better than we thought. That defense, we talked about this on the preseason show with our friend Jake, that defense still shaped up to be legit. I think his take was, if we can just get anything from the offense, we're going to be a pretty solid team. So far, it looks like they might have something from the offense. At home, Cousin Jared, plus odds, again, they're not all going to win, but if you take enough home dogs that the model thinks maybe should be favored or can at least hang around, eventually you just go 500, you're going to make some money, right?
Yeah, and another one where I'm kind of surprised, it's plus 140. I would have thought this maybe more like plus 120 or something, so really think there's a lot of value there. Another thing that I wrote about before the season, I did not know how Tennessee was going to feel letting Nico go, and not because Nico was a great quarterback, But just because if Joey Aguilar was a big step down in quarterback play can be the difference in a lot of wins in the SEC
Mm-hmm.
because the games are all going to be so close. But I've seen it with my own eyes in that first game between Tennessee and Syracuse, and have seen multiple other people talk about it as well. That Joey Aguilar may not be a better quarterback by the metrics that we like to measure, but from a personality perspective and the way that he wants to execute the offense. For example, he had more than a few times in that Syracuse game where he just threw the ball up downfield and he was going to let his receivers make a play. And when you think about that veer and shoot offense, that's really a big part of that offense is creating space, going quick, getting those matchups. And sometimes you just got to trust your guys to, go out there and make a play. And I think that brings a dimension to the Tennessee offense that they were missing with Nico because he was just a little less likely to make those plays. He wasn't necessarily, it didn't feel like he was just a perfect fit for the offense. Joey Aguilar, maybe a little bit worse of a quarterback, but more of a better fit for the offense. So I think I'm actually higher on Tennessee because of what I saw from their offense so far this season, as opposed to that defense that you talked about. Defense is still good. I just like what I've seen from the offense more. Georgia's Georgia. You know exactly what you're going to get, in my opinion, there. I just think that Tennessee just has a little extra in the tank offensively that maybe they've been missing the past couple of years.
Yeah, and Sidelines got Joey Aguilar, 94th best quarterback in college football.
Yep.
Not good, but
not the traditional measurables, but I think he's a good fit.
And there was enough other talent on that offense that Sideline still says their offense is ranked number 13. So that's like I said, sometimes it's, every once in a while you do get that game manager that Joe Flacco was that guy for a long time, Elvis Gerback or whatever, right? Some of these NFL quarterbacks that have been talking about that could get the guy.
Can we use some college analogies here? How about a Ken Dorsey? Let's go with a Jared Zabransky. I mean, there's lots of good, college guys that we can use as well.
There you go. There you go. So we're going to take the plus odds with Tennessee at home.
Craig Krenzel for Ohio State, man. He had Ted Ginn and Maurice Claret. He just had to throw it up anyway. Was that Santonio?
This is why
I don't know.
This is why you're on this show.
Yeah.
You started the season and we had, Georgia was up here at the top, and that top tier. Tennessee was a little bit more. We were a little bit concerned of them. Tennessee's doing this number, and Georgia's kind of doing this number. That doesn't mean Georgia's doomed. It doesn't mean Georgia's not necessarily the better team. But Model's saying, hey, these teams are a whole lot closer than you'd think. Right now, they're being treated like Georgia's massively better, and the Sideline says these teams are about the same. And so when you give them this game at Tennessee, they should actually be favored in this game. That might be a little bit of a reach. 58% seems a little bit high, but to say Tennessee wins this game more than 50% of the time, would it be crazy? Unfortunately, of course, they're only going to play it one time, or fortunately, maybe for the players, that sounds like a lot of work to play it,
yep.
100 times. But
yeah,
Sideline does think that Tennessee can win enough to make this a valuable pick.
It was Michael Jenkins. I knew I had that wrong. It was Michael Jenkins was the guy that caught the Craig Krenzel pass against Purdue. Anyway, that's neither here nor
there. You go. LSU and Florida, your night game of the week. Wow. LSU beats Clemson. Wins their next game, though they do it very unconvincingly against Louisiana Tech. Drops to number 17, partially because the model wasn't sold on Clemson. So if it's not sold on Clemson, it's not going to be sold on LSU. Florida, we talked about, hey, we don't want to ignore that Lion thing, but we didn't want to make too much of it either. After what they did against South Florida, how are they still ranked number 9, Cousin Jared? I feel like this is going to be the model's hottest take of the week that I'm not trying to make it a hot take. We talked about it's not what we're giving, but the model's really high on Florida. Thinks they win this game on the road by an average of 1 point. We're taking 9.5 points, I believe, which is way too many for this situation. Obviously, if you can grab a 10, go for it. Anything more than a touchdown seems like a gift. I'm not sure I think that Florida should be favored on the road in this game, but I do think that they are at least as good as LSU, and this line implies LSU is the much better team. Because, Jared, how are we going to ignore what LSU did against Louisiana Tech, but not, but penalize Florida for their crappy performance, especially when Florida's crappy performance was maybe some execution things, maybe some bad luck, maybe some heads not in the game that you hope get fixed this week? Is that the thing? Or are we just thinking they're never going to get it right? I mean, what's the problem with Florida at this point?
Yeah, so I guess I don't know what the problem with Florida is, but I think
And that's the confusing part. That's the hard part. Is it's not
yes,
that straightforward.
yes, but let me propose to you that Billy Napier is the new Hugh Freeze. If it is a big game, he has proven the past couple of years that he can get his team up and ready to play for the big games. If it is a game they should win handily, tread lightly, because an upset can happen at any time. Love Florida in this spot. Napier once again somehow is coaching for his job. I thought Graham Mertz getting hurt.
That's his middle name now, right?
Yes,
Billy coaching
yes.
for his job, Napier. It seems
Yes.
like it.
If not, it should be. I thought Graham Mertz getting hurt last year was the best thing for Napier's job because it forced him to play with Lagway, who looked good.
And the worst thing for the fan base who wanted him fired.
Yes, exactly. He bought himself another year. And I really thought if Lagway stayed healthy, he was going to be able to keep his job through this year. Now, I'm not convinced of that. But I think in this specific spot, before things potentially start to kind of just go really south, I think this is a great bounce back spot for Florida. You mentioned LSU looking uninspired in that game against Louisiana Tech. You know Florida's going to come out fired up. And like I said, Napier has seemingly done a better job. The bigger the game, the better Florida has played. I know they played Texas last year. Lagway was hurt. I don't count that. As long as they're healthy, I think they're going to give
also
LSU
that
everything
Texas team. That Texas team is better than this LSU team.
Yeah.
I would
Much
say
better.
it's pretty clear. I don't
Yep.
think that's. I think a couple things here. Number one, you mentioned bounce back spot. I love bounce back spots. I love early in the season bounce back spots, especially if you have a reason to think someone wasn't doing well when they should have, or vice versa, because you tend to get a lot of value with the market really overcorrecting, overreacting to that. Everybody saw the Florida situation, the way they melted down, and you typically get a lot of value just saying that's 1 week. Like we talk about this all the time. You're never as bad as you look at your worst, and you're never as good as you look at your best. That's true for humans in life. Right. It's also true for sports teams, right? And so Florida's not that bad. But I love what you said there, which is we did this last year. Florida looked terrible against some teams they shouldn't have, and Billy Napier was going to get fired. And then in comes DJ Lagway in some big games, and all of a sudden Florida was printing us money every week when the model said, hey, pay attention here. And we were backing them left and right, and they were making us look really smart.
Yep.
I'm not giving up on Florida this year. I'm not giving up on that they can compete for an SEC, spot in the SEC championship game or compete for a playoff spot. It's going to be impossible with how many good teams in the SEC, according to Sideline right now. Even if you ignore LSU, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 of the top 11 teams are in the SEC.
Yeah.
I mean, that's insane, right? So they could obviously go 5 and 7. Any of these SEC teams could, basically, because it just depends on their schedule and how things break for them. But I'm not giving up on them and saying I think there's a real chance that Florida, like you said, going to play better now in conference games like they did last year against the better competition. My big asterisk with this is if we don't see them figure out the fundamentals a little bit better this week, then this could be, Billy Napier's exit. We talked about that first coach fired, and I don't think we really considered this one. That's why we took big plus odds, because we knew any coach get fired. But if they lose this game, that's fine. But if they get embarrassed in this game and they don't play fundamentally sound football and all the mistakes they did, like they did against South Florida, the safety right there, boom, flips the game on top of all the other countless mistakes they made. It's going to be a tough answer. A tough call to answer here that next morning, I think, for Florida fans.
Well, and so we talked about this before the season, but Florida's schedule, I mean, really, you could go all the way through the schedule. You know what? I'm going to go through all the way through the schedule because that's what we do. LSU, Miami, Texas A&M, Mississippi State, which, you would have thought, but who knows now. Georgia, Kentucky, Ole Miss, Tennessee, Florida State. I mean, it is just terrible if he does not win one of the next four, which is LSU, Miami, Texas, and Texas A&M. I mean, why are you keeping him around at that point? What do I know?
Yeah, I think it's a great question. Moving along to our AA games, folks. A type of battery, a level of minor league baseball and games the model has opinions on. Buffalo and Kent State, this would also fall into the you don't got to watch them to make the monies, which we'll get to later, because this game is definitely not worth keeping an eye on. A noon game, there's plenty of other noon things. We're going to like 21.5 with Buffalo. Model says they're doing by 31.7. Because, Jared, I have one rule in life. And that rule is if the model says to fade Kent State, you fade Kent State. It's that simple, and that's really all I have to say about this game.
I thought you were going to say it was floss because you had a bad experience with the root canal. Was your one rule. So I will approach this a little bit differently. You mentioned that Sideline says there's also an edge on the total here. I have found myself only in rare circumstances do I play the total in Kent State games, because it is always possible they scored 0, but it is also possible that their opponent scored like 60. So I just...
You have no idea what's going to happen.
Yes, exactly. And so lay 21.5, great. Don't want to touch the total because Buffalo could go above the total. I don't even know what it is. Buffalo could go over it by themselves.
Total's 48.5. Sideline says projects Buffalo to score 47. So this is another game where Buffalo could get to the over by themselves. And we've seen teams do that against Kent State. And we've seen teams that need to do that to get to the over against Kent State because they score zeros.
Yeah.
Absolutely. They could score 47. And if Kent State scores 0, this game isn't going over.
Yep.
So, but Kent State could score. I mean, they'll play Buffalo's a weaker opponent than some of what they have played, when they get beat really bad. The bottom of the MAC, as you mentioned, might be really bad. Buffalo might be decent. I mean, the top of the MAC might be okay. There might be a couple of reasonable teams there.
Yeah, they're okay for a MAC team.
And if Buffalo's one of those teams, this is a game that even though it's on the road, Buffalo could thump them. And that's why I like laying 21.5. I think the books are putting that half on there as like, oh, who wants to lay the hook over 21? And I think it's like me, because this number should be like 28.
Yeah.
I wouldn't want to lay a number like 28 because backdoor covers, and you just never know at the end of blowouts. But this one's a big enough one where I'm like, you never know. And they might win by exactly 21. It may be the hook that gets us. But there's just way more ways I see Buffalo just destroying Kent State than anything else, who have rightfully claimed bottom of Sideline. Number 136 offensive, 136 defensive, 136 overall. That's bad. UTEP and Texas, a game that sets up very similar to the San Jose State game for Texas. This one's in the late afternoon, 4:15, not the early slot. But we had a AA on Texas last week as well, where the model said take the points with San Jose State and take the under. Both of those hit. Now, I decided that we should take the under in that game, and I was texting my dad because I said, I think there's just way more ways this under should hit. I said, this under should be a touchdown lower than it was, which I think is about where the final number ended up landing. I said, because at the end of these blowouts, so you just never know about taking all those points. And that's kind of how that Texas-San Jose State game played out. San Jose State covered by the hair of their chinny chin chin. Should have covered if not for a 10-minute stretch where they just got destroyed. But yet, on the other hand, with games like this, one thing in Texas easily covers that game. And that's kind of how I see this one. Texas is by far the better team. Will they cover a big number? The model says on average, no, just like they did last week. You're paying too high of a tax for this big favorite. But I don't want to have to worry about that because I think this total should be about a touchdown lower, just like it was last week. This Texas offense is good. That defense is insanely legit. Yes. And they have no inspiration with pace whatsoever. The one thing that gives me a little bit of caution here, UTEP pace in the top half. But, on the other hand, when you look at San Jose State, it's not like their pace was at a snail's clip either. And they just struggled to move the ball so poorly. They couldn't get anything going. You're giving it right back to Texas, who then wasn't really moving it very quick other than a couple of deep plays. San Jose State ranks 48th in pace, according to Sideline, right behind UTEP. So I just see it being very similar to last week. Cousin Jared, what's your take?
Copy and paste everything I said last week about San Jose State game for this game. We talked a little bit about Penn State, how they just, it's all about conference play, get to conference play, get healthy. Same thing with Texas. They want to win. They don't care by what number. They just want to win, get this game over with. That San Jose State game, I'll do my first, I don't know why I'm blanking on his name now, but the Illinois coach, who was at Arkansas at the time, Brett Bielema, borderline erotic when he was talking about taking the knee inside the 5-yard line against Texas. It was borderline erotic to see how slow that game was going, that end of that Texas-San Jose State game last week, where nobody was wanting to score. San Jose State, they had collected the check. They were just ready to get on the plane. Texas most everybody was healthy. They were ready for the game to be over. I see a very similar thing.
Yeah, because that game was cruising to an under, and then there was that firestorm of a bunch of points.
Yep.
And then all of a sudden, it was just like we went back to just nobody cares again.
Yep.
We actually didn't cover that game on show. I think that was part of the update that we did. Got that one to it. So maybe copy and paste everything that you thought about it. Basically, just kind of what we're saying. I want to talk real quick about Texas and Ohio State since we aren't covering the Ohio State game. Saturday has them as the top 2 teams. Alabama lurking at 3rd. It's interesting to me because the model also has Julian Saint and Arch Manning as such highly rated. I think like the number 1 and number 2 quarterbacks. Are they the best 2 quarterbacks? Almost assuredly not, just because there are 134 other competitors. But the model's really high on both of these teams, partially because they played each other. And this is an interesting situation because it's like, well, they're good because they played each other close and we thought they were good, and that solidified that they're good. And I know people are like, but maybe they're both just okay. And I would say, You might be right, except who else is good is the problem. Like, nobody has looked good yet in 2 games, in my opinion, that we thought would be good.
Right.
Oregon may be the best one of that, and they've really flown up Sidelines ratings, but they also played an Oklahoma State team who we've already were saying at the start of the season, Gundy probably the game's passed him by, and then Gundy's comments, and we talked about Dan Lanning, the great motivator, and how he can get a team fired up, and my goodness, you saw that. So it's like, part of me says, like, I'm sympathetic to arguments that, well, why is the model so high on these 2 teams when their best argument is they played each other, basically? And I'm like, well, we have last year's data. We have a little bit of data from the year before that, not a ton at that point, player-based model, and sure, but argue to me who's better. And at this point, it's like, I got nothing. And Bama being 3rd, I'm thinking that's crazy, but also who's really been better? There's a few teams that maybe have that if they keep playing this way, they'll pass them. It's kind of an interesting situation, and that's, I think, why the model is so high on these quarterbacks for these 2 teams, because it saw what they did against those defenses. And, of course, that's the big reason this game is going to go under, according to the models, that Texas defense might be the best unit in college football. And you combine that with this insanely slow pace that they've developed, and all of a sudden you're thinking that's going to make it real tough for points. Average game having 41 points is why we like the under 51 as the A grade play in that AA game. Also, Middle Tennessee and Nevada, 2 teams, Cousin Jared, I don't think we've talked one bit about at a 5 o'clock Eastern start. I can't believe that. Over 46.5 as the A grade play that we're going with the average game here. Thinks it'll be probably average college football, mid 50s. The average score might have dropped maybe into more 53s or so as the rule changes have taken place, but we're thinking in the 50s makes a lot of sense, and so we're going over 46.5. Because Jared, tell us more.
For the love of everything that's good, don't watch this game. But I think Middle Tennessee State's defense is truly garbage. Like I said, they gave up 34 points to Austin Peay. They found a way to make the Wisconsin offense look like it was the old Russell Wilson, Monty Ball days. And so I think that Nevada will be able to have an average game here. Of course, Nevada's not anything to write home about either. I think Middle Tennessee State can get to, I don't know, 14, 17 points or something like that. And so that's going to be enough to get us over a number that's in the upper 40s. This is definitely one where, like, if it gets to 51, which I don't know if it would, but I'm like, you're kind of asking a lot of one of these teams in that scenario. But when we're still in the mid 40s or mid to upper 40s, sure, I can get behind.
Yeah, and it's one of those where, 51, 52 are key numbers in the low 50s. We definitely would not encourage you to play it over above that if it does move. This is a game that's so going to be overlooked that a reasonable size bet or two could move this number. This is not going to be taking a lot of action, folks. So never know where this number is going to go. We think it's way too low. Could have a lot of movement on it. May not, because maybe nobody respected enough comes in and places a bet on it, and the number just sits. You never really know with these situations. But Middle Tennessee, I just wanted to comment on. You mentioned their defense being truly terrible. The offense, according to Sideline, even worse. And you mentioned the bottom teams, because we do like to talk about the bottom here as well as the top. If you're in the middle, that's where we don't care about you. Be extraordinary. Be extraordinarily good or bad. That's a life lesson.
Yeah.
Kent State taking over the bottom slot. Akron, second to worst, even though they were the preseason favorites for the worst, right behind them. Ball State mentioning joining them in the cellar of MAC trio teams. The next worst team, Middle Tennessee State. And the only other two teams even in that same stratosphere are teams we've talked about being bad as well, UMass and Kennesaw State. There's a pretty big gap there on those bottom six, and Middle Tennessee squarely in that. And, just how bad they are in general. Sometimes that leads to higher scoring games just because weird things happen. And then you throw in the pace factor. Middle Tennessee State, we're expecting to play a little bit faster. Nevada will be happy to go with that. Nevada coming in the game plan almost has to be get as many possessions as possible, because they know with more possessions, they're going to win this game. And so there's just a lot of little things kind of adding up, pointing towards more likely to be over than under. You never really know, so we prefer to play it where we're still getting the win on 47-48. And that's why we love this over at 46.5. Because there are multiple other AA games over on Patreon. A couple of them I see here we have picks on. One of them we don't. One of them I think you and I both independently looked at and said, I don't know.
Yeah.
So if you're interested in all that, of course, Patreon, that link in the show description. $19.99 a month will get you Discord chat, written articles, blah, blah, blah. And so over 51 in the Memphis-Troy game, an A grade play here for us as the model projects 57.8. Jared, you gave us a winner in the Memphis total last week. This feels like if people were to go watch that clip, everything you said there is everything you're going to say right here.
You took the words out of my mouth. Love going over in a Memphis game. If it's upper 40s or lower 50s, I'd be petrified if it were anything higher. So that same still applies here. The other thing I'll say is Troy still, performed admirably against Clemson. Last week we talked a lot about, Clemson coming down a little bit. Troy played excellent the first half of that game last week. I think Troy still has a little bit of the connotation left over from the John Summerall era, where they were just all defense, and their defense is nothing really to write home about right now. I think they're just kind of living off that reputation that they had under Summerall. So this is one where I think it should be closer to 55 as opposed to 51. Only sounds like 4 points, but 4 of the most important points that there are in totals. So yeah, let's go over in this one.
Especially in Memphis games. And folks, the editor in my ear is telling me last week was not a winner of Memphis, it was a push. We went over 54.
We pushed on 54.
And I pushed on 54. How is that even possible?
Only Memphis can find a way to push on 54.
Well, yeah, and that's why we talk about, too, you made the comment, we said Memphis, for whatever reason, is going to play like every game right around like mid-50s, upper 50s, and so it's like, it doesn't matter who they're playing. If it's a total in the low 60s, and you're expecting fireworks, like just be leery, right? It's one of those where they hang there. And this game was heading for that. There was a point in that game where I think the The live total was in the 60s and the 70s, even, and then all of a sudden it just died and landed
Yep.
again. 54, which how do
Yep.
you push on over 54? That should have,
Yep.
and that's why we like it here, because again, over 51 is the thing.
Yeah.
Who knows about what Memphis and likes to do with key numbers? 51, 52 are your key numbers there in the low 50s. And so we get the win on one. We might push again on it with this one. But this is one where if it gets a 52 and a half, it's like, oh gosh. I mean, probably, but who knows with Memphis.
If we lose on this one 30-20, I don't know. I'll do something. But if we push on 54 and then lose on a 50, I'll do something. I don't know what it'll be. I'll do something.
Hoping that we don't have to find out.
Yeah. Same.
Iowa State and Arkansas State, we have the average game here at 57 and a half. We're going to go over 55 as the B grade pick, one of our B grades that we sprinkle in. Cousin Jared, what are your thoughts on this one?
You just don't get very many opportunities. Okay, number one, Sideline loves an Iowa State under. So the fact that Sideline's saying that there's an edge toward the over here kind of catches my eye. The other thing is Arkansas State, and I mean, it's been consistent in the time that Butch Jones has been there. They play fast, their offense fine, their defense is terrible. And I know that Iowa State has the reputation, even I talked about it earlier in the show, them in Utah. I feel like they're slow it down, solid defensive team. But Iowa State has enough firepower that if Arkansas State wants to give up, 8 yards per rush, Iowa State's going to take it, and they could put up 55 themselves. This game feels 45-10 to me. So 55 being the most common number, I'm good taking the 55. And let's just say maybe Arkansas State gets a late garbage time touchdown, or Iowa State, I don't know, they break an extra long run and it ends up being, 48-10. But yeah, I just think Iowa State's going to be able to score as many points as they want in this one.
And that's why this is part of the run, don't walk segment here, is the key number 55. We talked about it with Memphis being 51, making sure we get the best of the number, because last week, right, we talked about the push there. This we talk about 55. Even though that Memphis gave it 54, the run don't walk on that 54 last week was so that you get the win on 55. It just we somehow stumbled on the push. This one's because we think about the potential push protection there at 55, and that's going to hold true for the next game as well. Also in this afternoon slot, South Florida and Miami, we're going to go over 54 and a half as the run don't walk. Though this one's interesting with the model projecting. We're going to have to talk about this one. 76 points. I would be surprised if it got that high, and I have a reason why I will talk about that. But if nothing else, we love this getting the win on 55. But on top of that, the key numbers in the upper 50s being 58, 59. If you're getting the win on those, that's also the run that walk. So if this number moves, and it sounds like it might have even already moved from the time we were pulling lines to the time we were recording the show, which sometimes happens, unfortunately. We talked about this in week 1 with TCU, where we laid 3.5, and then we're recording on show. I'm like looking, I'm like, oh, it's already 3 now. There's a 3, not that it mattered, right?
Yeah.
Same thing. Sometimes it's going to go both ways, where it helps us or hurts. But getting the win on 58, 59, I mean, if you're over 57 and a half is still an amazing play with the model projecting this high. Now, I don't project it this high myself. I think the model's not, a little overestimating the pace of both of these teams. We've seen enough from both of them so far that illustrates that they're probably not going to play quite pants on fire as the model thinks they will, but there's still enough firepower on Miami's offense, enough questions on their defense, and enough weird things that can happen in these South Florida games. We saw in that first game with that Boise throwing fake punts out there, all the 4th down attempts, right? Enough weird things can happen that 76 might be a little high, but even if we drop the pace down here to where I think it would be, we'd still project this to get into the 60s, probably the mid or upper 60s. So anywhere in the mid to upper 50s makes for a great overplay. Cousin Jared, tell us more.
I agree. I don't feel like it's going to get to 76. The thing is that I think Sideline, not struggling. Sideline's looking at the pace that South Florida plays with. but the past two games they haven't really. I don't know if they've chosen not to play with that pace or it's just the way that the game has played out in both the games against Boise State and Florida. Both of those games were sloppily played by the opposing teams. With Boise, South Florida got up big early, and they had no reason to push the pace. And every time it looked like might start mounting a comeback, they shot themselves in the foot. And then last week, same thing. All sorts of weird things happened. You never really felt like South Florida got in a groove offensively. I don't know if that happens against Miami either, but one thing that I do feel confident in saying is that if they start playing in a crazy game with Miami, I do have enough faith. Miami's going to score like 45 points if South Florida starts doing those kind of crazy stuff with them. And then we just need South Florida to get like 14 or something. Uh, I think if South Florida has their way and the pace is what Sideline thinks it is, I feel good about the over. If this game gets crazy like all the other South Florida games have been, I don't think that plays into South Florida's favor with Miami. They can still put up a lot of points.
I think it's interesting here. I want to go back to that opening week game, Miami and Notre Dame, where we had the over and got the win on that one. Both teams, Miami and Notre Dame, the model was low on. Interestingly enough, the model is sticking there with Miami and saying, yeah, I don't buy it. Notre Dame is the team that it actually respects more now and has shut up the ratings a little bit. I think that's maybe what happens when you play Bethune-Cookman in week two. It's one of those things where it makes it work. Like you talked about with some other teams, it's tough to really get a good gauge because you're not necessarily going out there really showing your hand very much. But that was a game that went over against Notre Dame that a lot of experts were thinking was going to go under based off of a revamped Miami defense and Carson Beck maybe playing a little more of a pro style rather than the gunslinging that we saw last year from the Miami offense, and how Notre Dame was going to run the ball and grind it out. And that game still, went over a fairly low number in that one. This one, obviously, a little bit of a higher number, but not by much. And I don't know. South Florida's been a fun story so far. Those games have been really weird. I don't know what to make of it. Clearly, they're better than the model thought. They're up to number 64 now. But, the model's not running to tell you to lay the 17 with Miami at this point because it's starting to respect South Florida a little bit more. But with regards to how weird those games played out, there still are enough ingredients here to think that even if it plays out like that Notre Dame game, but you take the fact that they're not going to play anywhere near the same style that Notre Dame plays, that game got to 51. This one ought to be able to get to 61, right? I think is kind of where my head's at on it. That I stand by what we said in that week one show, which was if you think Miami's good, it either means their defense is legit, which I don't think we saw that against Notre Dame. It played admirably enough, but I don't think it's legit. Or you think that Miami's offense is going to be able to pick up where it did last year. And I think that's a little bit more of a possibility because Carson Beck against a Notre Dame defense that's pretty good, got the job done. And so I think that's, worth pointing out there that, we don't have a second data point on Notre Dame yet, but Notre Dame looked impressive enough, and what Miami did in that game, scoring 24 against Notre Dame, again, doesn't give you any pause for, well, Miami's going to become this defensive juggernaut and play this low-scoring game. Like you said, we think Miami's going to get their points because of the style that they play and the talent that they've got. Arkansas Ole Miss, a consideration for a game of the week simply because any SEC conference game of top teams could potentially be that. I think the issue here is Arkansas, while being ranked number 30 according to Sideline would classify as a top team for most conferences, puts them almost like the 30th best team in the SEC, basically, is what that means here. Arkansas on the road, trying to hang in there, keep this close. The spread I see is 9 right now. Instead, we're going to go under in an Ole Miss game and back-to-back weeks.
And hope
maybe
we don't get a field goal at the end.
Hope we don't get a field goal at the end because this number is sitting about where the Kentucky one was with regards to But so we could have another late field goal that sends us over and gives Arkansas a cover. Hopefully, we don't see a rematch of that.
Yeah.
But Cousin Jared, this Ole Miss offense, just the model doesn't think they really want to play that fast. They probably play a little faster than the model thinks. 123 seems a little bit low. I watched enough of that Kentucky game. I don't really think it's that low, but they also have times where they really can just kill the clock because Lane Kiffin is just trying to, get the win and get out of there in some of these situations. If he goes up 14 in the third quarter, they aren't going to be, playing quickly. They kind of only played quickly a little bit against Kentucky there because I think the way that game played out, I'm not sure this one plays out the same being at Ole Miss. What's your take?
So Austin Simmons, the quarterback this year for Ole Miss, everybody that I've read is very high on him. I know Kiffin's high on him. He got a little banged up in the Kentucky game, left the game. After the fact, Kiffin said he could have come back if the outcome was in question. So we don't think he's going to have any limitations. But a couple of times on this show now, we've talked about how the transfer portal has kind of affected the depth of some of these teams. If Simmons is not 100%, they cannot be running him out there and expecting him to carry the ball 10 times, or running around and making too many plays. He's going to have to protect himself, get rid of the ball, throw it out of bounds. And so for me, I like the under anyway. 62.5 is a lot of points. Both these offenses are good, but there's a level of defense in the SEC that most teams are capable of playing. I think both of these teams are capable of playing a game that stays under 62.5. But if there are any restrictions at all on Simmons, like this play even more, because if you take away some of his dynamicism, if he's just trying to kind of stay healthy, they're trying not to run as many designed runs. That's only going to hurt Ole Miss's offense a little bit.
I'm not sure if dynamicism is a word, but
it can be.
It can be.
Yeah.
Austin Simmons backup. I'm not even going to try to pronounce his first name, but A grade first name. 10 letters in his first name, only 3 consonants. I mean, that is really impressive. Wow. Very well done. 7 vowels. Yeah. I love that. I just wanted to come back real quick and what I comment on about the way the game played out, folks. Kentucky gets up 7-zip in the first quarter. They're up 10-zip in the second quarter. It's tied 20-20 in the third quarter. Ole Miss was like in a fight in that game. They finally took a 2-score lead for the first time in that game with 1 minute and 10 seconds left. That's the other thing, of course, that hurt. That we were under even the closing number with 1.5 minutes to go in the game. But folks, Ole Miss, that was a fight of a game. Well done by Kentucky. It almost played out exactly like you said, Cousin Jared, where we talked about Kentucky at home just finds a way to ugly it up against Ole Miss and frustrate them. And that's mostly what happened. And that, I think, even led Ole Miss playing a little bit faster than they wanted to. If they're at home in this game, they are at home. They're at home, and if they can get up, you can sometimes see Lane Kiffin completely take the air out of the ball. That would also align with what you said about trying to protect the quarterback, because this is a very early back-to-back conference games now for them. I don't know. I haven't looked at the schedule, but they've got to have a bye week or a non-conference coming up where they can really rest people, you would hope. And so just to get out of Dodge here with the second conference win, I feel like it's got to be up there. So that's why we like the under in this one. East Carolina and Coastal Carolina are playing at night in a game that we are laying 7.5. Cousin Jared, run, don't walk. To lay 7.5, I feel like is an interesting choice. Your model says 13.3. Are you worried about this? Or are you thinking about this one getting into double digits and saying, we just got to make sure we lay single digits on this one?
Yep. That's exactly what I'm thinking. This is the Mike Leach Memorial. Go lay 7.5 and 8.5 because this number is headed to like 12.5 or 13, and there's no reason to wait. Jamie Chadwell is not walking through that door. A healthy Grayson McCall, poor guy couldn't stay healthy. He's not walking through that door. This Coastal Carolina team is not the Coastal Carolina team that you remember from the past few seasons. They got absolutely railroaded against Virginia, a Virginia team that I thought might potentially have one of the first coaches fired this season. They beat Charleston Southern 13-0 last week. They were up 3-0 in that game early in the fourth quarter. Their starting quarterback was benched after throwing 3 interceptions. This Coastal Carolina team is just not good. I think that anybody who has paid attention will see that, and I think this number is destined to go past 10. So I want to just lay the 7.5 now. If you got this one at open, it opened at 6.5. So that would have been really nice. But yeah, I say get this at 7.5 now because I think this will be past 10 once the game kicks off.
I would be really curious to know where Charleston Southern lands in. We don't have FCS rankings here at Sideline, but I'm going to say friend of the show. We don't actually know, of course. Bill Connolly, who does SP Plus, does have all the way through Division 3, and my hunch is Charleston Southern's gonna be like in the 200s or so. 292. I just found. I was scanning the screen there, see if I could 292. So that's concerning.
Yes.
When you're up 3. I assume at home, because why would they
Yes,
go on
at
their
home.
home game?
Yes.
It's the number 292, and you're up 3-0 in the fourth quarter.
Well, and if you read the AP report, you're like, the backup quarterback came in and led to a win. You're like, oh, okay, what did the backup quarterback do? He went 3 of 5 for 37 yards. So, there just wasn't much to be optimistic about.
And the model thinks the defense is worse. That's got to be real concerning if you're a Coastal Carolina fan out there. Love the colors, though. Love the colors. Love the beach. A lot of good things there, but maybe not great football. At this point, I believe here the last game in the Run Don't Walk segment, Utah and Wyoming, and 8:00 Eastern. Because you tried to fit this in After Dark, and I just wasn't having it. We got to have rules around here. 8 p.m. Eastern doesn't classify as After Dark. So instead, we're going to get it's an After Dark appetizer, we can call it. Under 48, A-grade play. Run, don't walk here because, again, your key numbers in the upper 40s, 47, 48. So lock this in, get the best number possible. Sideline thinks 41.8, so we're at the wrong end of the key numbers of the 40s. Utah, we think, is much improved on offense. We think their offense is going to finally get going back to where it was when they had a healthy Cam Rising for that one season. We've seen that there in Utah, but whether or not their offense clicks, we've always seen their defense be good. There's no reason for them to play with any pace in this game or do anything other than go get the win. Wyoming is a weird place to play. It's sometimes a very tough place to play.
Texas Tech a couple of years ago went there and lost.
And and there are a lot of teams that have gone in there and lost or near loss. So this is just go in and get the win and get out of Dodge, get out of Laramie. In a game that they should win handily. But we're thinking no reason to try to get cute, no reason to try to show any cards for conference, because if you mess around, you might lose this game. And so that really plays in, I think, to this under, along with the key number aspect. I'm not sure, model says 41, 42. If this total was 44.5, I would say that seems about right as well. I wouldn't complain about that. I would lean under 45.5. That's the lowest I would go for sure, but really just loving the fact that we get the win if it lands 47, 48. Because this feels like one of those games where if we can avoid overtime, I'm feeling pretty good, because I know Utah is a big favorite here, as they should be. But again, if weird things happen in Laramie, that's where I'm really worried about this total, this under dying. As long as we don't have a weird game, I feel like we should be good here. What's your thoughts?
Yeah, you talked a little bit about the Utah side of things. I'll go over to the Wyoming side of things. And if you're wondering, is Wyoming still doing Wyoming things? The first week of the season, they beat Akron 10-0. So yeah, Wyoming's still doing Wyoming things. And, because I'm a crazy person, I look at lines as they come out, and this one came out at 48. And I was like, there is no way 48 is still there by the time we record the show. I cannot believe that this is still 48. We talk all the time that you can't predict what way the line's going to move, but we know usually it's going to move towards sideline. I thought this was going to drop down to like at least 47, maybe closer to 45. Can't believe that 48 is still available as of the recording of the show.
I agree. And that's why I threw about the 44 and a half, 45 and a half thing is, to me, this number gets to 45 and a half. I'm still leaning that on. I'm still playing the under at that number. I'm regretful. I'm playing it less because I'm just kicking myself for the fact that this game could land 47, 48. And we'd miss out because one random player, one random late pick six, boom, there's 7 more points, right? So this game could be at 41. The model looked like a genius, and then a pick six gets it to 48, and then the fact that we pushed at 48, that's why we worry about key numbers. That's why we get the best of the, or we try to get the best of the number, right? But to me, this should be bet down to 45 and a half. I'm still leaning under. It gets to 45. I'm going, It gets to 44 and a half, and I'm like, I don't. It's not a big enough edge. I'm not messing with it. And the fact that hasn't started to happen yet is interesting. I don't know if money's going to come in later. I don't know if there's any tension. A lot of times things move when limits move, and so there's all those weird games. We don't specialize in following that, trying to predict that. To me, that's like trying to predict the stock market. Can I tell you, could I build a model and try to tell you what stocks should be priced where? Yes. Unfortunately, the stock market nowadays is half vibes, right? And so when it's vibes of what moving, it's hard to do. And that's what these lines are sometimes. You just never know when people are trying to manipulate the number. I don't know where the number's going to go. I just like to say, let's take the value and be happy. That's kind of where it's hanging around, so let's not complain. And
Wait,
take that under
so you're telling us to invest in value stocks instead of growth stocks?
I am not. I'm not a fiduciary. That's the clip I gotta say. In the legal trouble.
This is not investment advice.
A financial show. Folks, we have 2 segments here that we like to talk about. Right, run, don't walk. Get the best of the number as quick as possible. But then we also have a bunch of games we talk about where we say, you know what, you don't have to watch and make the monies, and that's this next set of games right here, starting off noon Eastern. Again, plenty of other things to watch. Oklahoma and Temple. One of the other B grades we talked about here, under 51.5. Would really like that 52. That 52 and a half would get it to an A grade. But I like the under here for a couple of reasons. Number one, the head coach at Temple. Number 2, Oklahoma coming off of a great win against a very solid Michigan team, a Michigan team that is still struggling a little bit on offense to find their identity, with the freshman quarterback, but a great win, feeling like they're back, now playing at noon on the road. This feels sleepy start, let the defense carry them. Oklahoma up, 13-0 or something in the third quarter, 10-0 at the half, something like that, where how many times have we seen this, right? From, I'm blanking on his name now there at Temple, when he was at Sam Houston, ugling these games up, especially at home. I remember a couple years ago that Air Force game where it's like 14-0 or something, and each team had a combined like 5 possessions in the fourth quarter. I don't think it'll be quite that crazy, but there's just a couple of variables here that make me think that the interaction effect between them. I really think this game's going to struggle to get into the 50s. What's your angle on this one?
Yeah, Casey Keeler, the guy that was there at Sam Houston and now at Temple. You talked a little bit about Temple. Oklahoma might be the new Michigan. With Jim Harbaugh, we love to play an under in non-conference games with him. Could be the same thing with Oklahoma now with, a defensive-minded coach, more of a run-first offense, especially with Mateer, giving them the ability to run the ball more effectively than what they've been able to do in years past, especially with the quarterback. I kind of just a perfect spot coming off the game against Michigan, get everybody healthy. Yeah, I can see why this would appeal to you going under 51.
And we talked about it a lot already, but as the coaches get smarter, as we get more analytically inclined, you're going to see various things happen. One of them we've already mentioned is running quarterbacks. Why get them hurt? Why show off all your tricks in a game like this? Just go on the road, let your defense take care of it. Don't do anything crazy. Does that not mean there can't be pick sixes? Does that not mean there can't, that sort of thing? And fourth down decisions are swinging some of these totals, right? But there's just way more ways that this plays so conservatively from both sides of the ball, both coaches, and
Right.
what they want to do to keep this game even lower than the model would suggest, more into the mid to low 40s. I think it's very possible that under against Michigan was a lot of fun to watch for people like you and I who like unders,
Yeah.
and we're hoping for the same thing here. Even though I probably won't have eyeballs on it because I'm assuming it's going to be low scoring and boring and not going to be worth anything.
Yeah.
Oregon State at Texas Tech, folks. You don't got to watch them to make the monies because in a game like this, it may not be close at all. Sideline says that Tech wins by an average of 30 points. We're going to lay 23 and a half. Another one of those where I'm worried about a backdoor if the number gets too high, gets too close to Sideline's projection. Would I lay, 26 and a half in this case? Probably not. The fact that 24 is in there is probably the difference maker for me, just because I think 21, 24, 27, 28, these are all reasonable options. The other reason I like this game, though, is that 45 is a reasonable option here. We saw Tech last week play a very bad team, of course, in Kent State and just blow the doors off of them.
48-0 at halftime.
48-0 at halftime, but is Oregon State secretly going to be really bad this year? I feel like the market's really been moving against Oregon State here in these first two games. I'm wondering if the same thing's going to happen here. The market seems to be very right about Oregon State's struggles so far to start the season. This feels to me like one of those where we talk about sometimes the model and the market both struggle to catch up with just how good or bad a team is. It feels like it might be the case for Oregon State. The wheels seemingly falling off.
You took the words out of my mouth. It's going to be my first. I don't think we found the bottom yet for Oregon State. I think there is room left to go. For me, we talk about coaches trying to protect some of these players. For me, with Texas Tech, Baron Morton falls into the category that Hank King does. Like, if he's healthy, he'll play fine. You just got to keep him healthy. He's healthy going into this game with Oregon State, so let's lay the points, is what I would say.
Oregon State somehow ranked 79th last week, and after getting bet down basically to a pick'em, and then getting thumped at home by Fresno State, who, as we talked about, up and down opinions of Fresno State, but being led by, a guy like EJ Warner, who we're not really confident in as a college quarterback, somehow only falling to number 88. It makes me think what you're saying. I don't think we found the bottom yet. I think there's still room to go here. If Tech's up 48-0 at the half or something similar, which is probably they won't be up 48-0, but up something the equivalent of that here.
Yeah.
We're going to be talking about Oregon State outside the top 100 pretty soon. I think could be an ugly one there. Might be an ugly one here for different reasons, not because of it not being close, but because the quality of football here between Liberty, who probably still the class of the Conference USA. Unfortunately, that's not really saying much. Bowling Green might be a respectable team for the MAC, also not saying much. A 5 o'clock game, so it'll easily get lost in the shuffle of everything. We're going to take Bowling Green plus 195. So I think it says they win 53% of the time. Because, Jared, this to me is as simple as Liberty getting a lot of respect for what they've done in the past. This Liberty team, I don't think is quite as good as that one 2 years ago that had that magical run. I don't think they're quite as good as the team last year, even that we saw had a lot of flaws. If that team with a lot of flaws shows up against a MAC team that's decent enough, on the road, anything can happen. Should Liberty be favored in this? I don't think that's crazy. But the fact that we're getting almost plus 200 with Bowling Green seems a little bit crazy. Your break-even threshold for this is like 34%. And it's like, can Bowling Green at home win this 34% of the time? Absolutely. We've seen this Liberty team last year, again, not quite the same version as they were the year before, struggle in some games against teams with a pulse, which isn't half of the teams in Conference USA, but
Right.
the teams with the pulse can give them a little bit of a fight. Because, Jared, you love your random small schools.
Yeah.
This is up your alley.
Yeah. So Liberty lost to Jacksonville State last week, 34-24. The final score was a little misleading there. Liberty outgained Jacksonville State by 150 yards. Liberty had over 500 yards of offense. They went 50% on third downs, and they lost by 10 points because Jacksonville State ran the ball 50 times for 338 yards, 6.8 yards per carry. I think that everybody has an idea of how to approach attacking this Liberty defense now. I think Bowling Green is going to run and run and run some more. I think that even if sideline is a little high on Bowling Green, maybe if this is like 45% plus 195, still a great value. And this, I feel like, you don't got to watch them to make the money. This is the perfect game to have a money line on. And so if it gets out of hand, either way, don't care. I don't have to pay attention to it. So, we talked about there are certain teams that you may want to back on the money line. For me, this is a situation and two teams that I would just rather have on the money line and not necessarily care about, somebody trying to cover.
Jamie Chadwell's first season at Liberty, 2023, their dream season, 13-0 regular season. We were fairly high on them that year, and I think the reason we were is because they really took care of business against weaker opponents.
Yep.
For the most part, and maybe not
Yep.
necessarily all of them, but they were putting up some big numbers, and they were winning convincingly. Even in that season where they went 13-0, they played Bowling Green to open the season at home, and they only won by 10. And that was by far their best season. Bowling Green that year was pretty average, probably like they are for the MAC this year. I feel like Bowling Green's kind of the same every year. They're going to be around 5, 6, 7 wins, right? And that's what they were that year. That's probably what they're going to be around this year. But when you look at what Liberty did last year, not only losing, 3 regular season games, they lost to Buffalo handily in the Bahamas Bowl. Now, motivation, was that a letdown coming off the Fiesta Bowl? Sure, I'll give them a pass for that. But just going through the other results from Liberty last year, like they had a great win at home against Western Kentucky in late November, but they had a bunch of really concerning results. They needed overtime to win at UMass in a game that I believe UMass went for 2 for the win and didn't get it. They lost at Sam Houston, who had a great season, but was probably no different than this Bowling Green team, just very decent. They lost at home to Jacksonville State. They lost at Kennesaw State last year. Kennesaw State was
that's not good.
That's not good. They needed overtime to beat FIU at home last season. I mean, they went to New Mexico State. This is, of course, long, our boy Diego Pavia long gone. Only won that game by 6. They only beat Campbell at home by 14 last year. That was a one-year thing for Liberty where they had excelled to that level. And I think you're seeing it so far again this year. Only beating Maine by 21 in a game that 2 years ago, that would have been a game they probably win by 30 or something like that, 40 maybe. Yep. And then last week, it's not to say they're bad. They're just maybe not, 2 years ago they're actually good enough to be considered a top 40 team, a top 30 team, maybe even a top 20 team, right? A couple of years ago, depending on how you wanted to look at it. But last year was not that team. I don't think this year's that team. And so I think this is getting too much respect for some previous iterations of this team. I don't think that's them.
And I think another thing to keep in mind, in 80% of those games you listed from last year, sideline probably would have said back Liberty there. And so the fact that it's fairly strongly going the other way now, I think tells me something. Sideline has flipped on Liberty.
Yeah. Yep. State and Southern Miss. App State, according to Sideline, wins this 72% of the time, but we're getting to late minus 105. App State on the road, the better team, and the market agrees they're the better team by saying on the road, making it close to a pick 'em. But Sideline says they're the way better team, that they win by an average of about 9 points in this one. Because, Jordan, why do you think that the market sees App State as only a little bit better than Southern Miss, whereas we're seeing it, the model seeing it as they are much better than Southern Miss?
I think two things. Number one, they're looking at Charles Huff going from Marshall to Southern Miss and bringing like 20 players with him. The Marshall team that won the Sun Belt last season, a lot of that team is now at Southern Miss. And potentially they're looking at, for like 2.5 quarters, Southern Miss played Mississippi State reasonably close a couple of weekends ago. This is definitely one that I'm having my eye on, just because I think App State is a good play, but it is something I'm wondering, like, Sideline potentially having a difficult time with all the transfers. I know it's a player-based model and everything, but just kind of bringing in the culture. Like, because I would tend to agree with Sideline. Like, it's very difficult to change the culture at a place, even when you're bringing in 20 different players, to like make the change that quickly. And I think the market's just kind of saying, no, we think the change is like that. And I think it's going to be a much more gradual thing. So I'm going to be interested to see what happens with this one, because this is kind of like, I think this says a lot about how quickly you can rebuild a program in today's college football.
And interestingly of note, and this is where I will say that sometimes I'm harsh on the model. I try to be harsh on the model when it needs to be. I try to defend it when it needs to be, needs to be defended, and say, again, all models are wrong. Some models are useful, right? There's some things that the model says that I don't agree with. And I might be wrong, right? I have my own plenty of wrong takes, right? Where I will defend the model is to say, last year, or 2 years ago, excuse me, when Deion came into Colorado, and then was it GJ Kinney, or was he the one that left? I guess I can't remember. Texas State. I think he was the one that left Texas State, and they got whoever the new coach was. The model after week 1, after week 2, quickly said, "Oh, these teams are actually good." That's the benefit of being a player-based model. Mm-hmm. With Southern Miss, it's saying they still aren't there yet, and or App State's just better than you think. I'm not sure which one it is necessarily. I think it might be a little bit of both. Maybe a little bit of, App State, hey, you need a little more respect, but a little bit of, hey, you're not there yet, Southern Miss. But it has made those quick adjustments before. The fact that it's not doing that here, and it's a player-based model, to me says something. Now, they played Jackson State, who's still a very good FCS team, and they had a good enough win there. I wonder with Mississippi State, I wonder how good Arizona State's going to be. How many teams have we seen so far this year lose their star running back from last year and struggle? Because Boise State comes to mind as well, right? When you get these once in a program type running backs that go, and running back's not the most important position by any stretch of the imagination for a college football team, but when you get guys of that level, that maybe I don't know. It just makes me think the model's seeing something here. And it's reticent to adjust Southern Miss super early, and it's not reticent to do that in other situations.
And if you're curious, I don't think Cam Scatterboo is going to get enough touches for the Giants, but I don't know if you saw like the one highlight that Scatterboo had on Sunday for the Giants, but it looked just like what he would have done at Arizona State. He caught the ball and just completely trucked a guy, and then slipped under another tackle, and then like plowed a guy and got like 7 yards on when he should have been tackled for no gain. So I don't think they're going to use him, enough to where that becomes a common occurrence. But Cam Scatterboo looks exactly in the NFL like he did in college last year.
And you're thinking, there's a reason why this team won the Big 12 last year, because that guy did that to NFL players.
Yes.
And they just were like feeding him every time they could, because that's what I would have done too. Like, sometimes, like, coaching is very difficult. It is very tough, and you have to manage a lot of things, but sometimes it's kind of simple. And that's one of those things where he had an easy button. With Cam Scatterboo, and so not taking anything away from him, just that makes you wonder a little bit there. Maybe that's part of the other thing feeding into this Southern Miss maybe isn't that great yet, is that they lost to Mississippi State, and the model's not seeing that Mississippi State over Arizona State maybe quite like most people are seeing it, I guess, is kind of where I'll leave it. Jacksonville State and Georgia Southern, again, games you may not want to watch simply because the quality isn't there and there's other interesting things. Not to say it's not interesting football. Not going to be close football, not going to be things we can't learn, but just not the most aesthetically pleasing football here. Jacksonville State, we're going to take plus 145. You've seen this as a theme from us, these wrong team favored games, or these, can we get plus odds in a coin toss type game? Sideline says Jacksonville State wins this closer to 60% of the time, even if it's only 50%. Plus 145 is too good to pass up. A Jacksonville State team that you already mentioned being fairly impressed with, based off what they were able to do to Liberty, just in terms of, this is what we're going to do. Can you stop it? And the answer was no. And Georgia Southern, probably like Liberty, a solid team, not an amazing team. So why wouldn't the same thing play out there? We saw what Fresno did to Georgia Southern there in that second half, where they just owned them. And that's part of the reason why Georgia Southern ranks 126th in defense according to Sideline. Jacksonville State should be able to control the ball by running here, just like they did last weekend, and win by 10. There's my official prediction. They win by 10.
Yep. I was, ever since Clay Helton took the job at Georgia Southern, I've kind of just been waiting for things to come around, and the offense has done its part. Most weeks the offense has done its part. It's been the defense, and I'm to the point where I just, guilty until proven innocent with Georgia Southern's defense. I just don't trust it. I don't believe that it will have success week in and week out. And I think Jacksonville State is going to do exactly to Georgia Southern what it did to Liberty last week. If we come back here next week and Jacksonville State had 350 yards rushing, and be like, yeah, that sounds about right. So, I just think that, too many holes in Georgia Southern's defense is the way that I would kind of describe it.
I mean, and not to say that giving up 59 at USC says that you have the worst defense ever, because that's going to happen to a few teams. But, you have to wonder if there's any effect the next week after playing a team like USC, giving up all those points, a team that plays with a little bit of pace, more plays, like that can kind of wear you down a little bit. Anytime I think about the old school as a Baylor, and these old school Baylor offenses that, they just, so many plays, so much out there, so much pressure can just wear you out for the next week. It's almost the flip of when you play a team like a Kansas State back in the day, when they were just constantly grinding you out, right, and making you pay physically. Like those type of games that hit those extremes can really wear you out going into the next one. But even if we take all of that out, they still gave up 42 to Fresno State. Yeah. All those second half points they gave up in that one. And then that's not to take anything away from Jacksonville State, who we talked about their game against Liberty, but we didn't talk about the fact that they had a really good chance to win at UCF. Now, is UCF going to win the Big 12? Almost assuredly not. Are they one of the weaker teams in the Big 12? Absolutely. Is one of the weaker teams in the Big 12 still better than most of these other teams we're talking about in these ranks? Yeah. Absolutely. Like, I still think UCF's the better team. Jacksonville State almost went in there and won. I'm a little surprised they're not getting more respect here. It's almost like they expect to have lost everything because they lost their head coach. And it's like, well, if you were going to see them lose everything, I don't think you would have seen them in these first 2 weeks look as impressive as they did.
Right.
Relative to their competition. This is one of my favorite plays of the week here. Just take plus odds here. I would be happy with even money. I can't believe we're getting plus odds. Air Force. Speaking of a team that maybe has some problems, I don't know if Air Force is going to figure it out this year or not, but my goodness, there are some concerns from the model with regards to what they're going to be able to do, namely on offense, dropping now to 126th. Because, Jordan, we've seen Air Force have one of the better offenses of the service academies, even of the Mountain West in years past. And the struggles this year so far are real. But you know what can cure that is playing a bad defense who wants to play really fast and give you lots of chances. Air Force is going to have their chances to get it right. And that's why we're going to go over in this one, over 52.5 in a game that we think is going to have get enough possessions based off Utah State's pace. Air Force defense, not great as well. And Air Force liking to get lots of reps going on early here in the season as their pace, again, better than average. Model projecting 61. I'm not sure it gets quite that high, but the fact that we get the win in the key number of 55, and again, those key numbers in the upper 50s, is good enough to make this work for me. What's your take?
Important to note here, we move to our After Dark segment. So this is our first After Dark.
After Dark, yes.
What time does this one? What time does this one kick off?
9:45 p.m. Eastern. It's After Dark here while we're recording this. It's 11:30 p.m. Eastern time while we're recording this. So that's why I didn't see that one up very well, because it's already After Dark in my head.
Yes, I understand. Utah State is the Mountain West version of UAB, except with a better coach. But the point being, all of their games, I think, will find a way to get pointsy. And I think, importantly enough, their defense is bad enough to give up big runs to Air Force, and it won't be like a 3 yards, 4 yards. I think their defense is bad enough it'll be like 3 yards, 4 yards, 20 yards. And I think that's what gets this game over. If by, even if Utah State plays really well offensively in this game, of course that helps us too. So whether it's by Utah State scoring the points or if it's by Utah State's defense being bad, I like this. And I know it's 52.5. You might ask, do we wait around for the 52? I can't imagine that it would go back down to 52, but I'm confident enough to say 52.5, good enough to play it over that number as well.
Let's bring back a mini segment within the segment that we like to talk about a lot, which we haven't done this. We cover so many games here, we can't go into, as much as we'd like to, every little thing. But we also about every bet that you make, you ought to be able to figure out how ways it's going to lose. And if you can't figure out ways it's going to lose, and you're not thinking long enough, and you're not being careful enough with your bets, right? One way this loses, you already mentioned it. Air Force just gets a bunch of 3-yard runs, 4-yard runs, that sort of thing. That's what the model's seen so far, and that's why their offense is ranked lower, because it hasn't been able to get that going. We've seen, though, even, I believe, was it 2 years ago maybe, Air Force struggled a little bit at the start, figured it out really well by the end of the season. Yep. We've seen Air Force start off hot and struggle down the stretch and go the other direction because of injuries. Air Force is a team every week I feel like you got to reevaluate, because they don't have the depth to handle injuries, but yet they've got the discipline to improve week to week. And so they're just all over the place. We're only 2 games into the season. And like you said, if Air Force doesn't get stuck with those 3-yard, 4-yard runs where it's long drives, then all of a sudden breaking those runs, and then Utah State playing fast on offense, there are going to be so many possessions in this game. This game might end up in the 70s. The other way, of course, this game loses, I think, is if people look at Air Force and think that their game plan is going to be to try to get Utah State out of their style. Historically, that's not been the MO of the service academies. The MO of the service academies has been do what they do, which is just run the triple option. They're not necessarily trying to go slower against better teams or faster against different teams. They're just playing their style and doing what they do. And if that means they play a little faster, they play a little faster. If it means they play a little slower, they play a little slower. Asterisk, until they all 3 play each other, and then they all decide, we don't want to get hurt. Let's have the fewest number of possessions as possible. It's this bizarre thing, right?
Yeah.
But otherwise, Air Force doesn't really play that slow, and they don't tend to get taken out of their game. They just do what they do. So far, doing what they do, the model has not taken a liking to it. But again, one of the best ways to overcome that is have a game where you're going to have a lot of opportunities. Their only game, of course, that Bucknell game where they put up a lot of points, but the offense was not as efficient, I guess is the way I will frame it, as what the model expected when you play a team like Bucknell. But again, coming off a bye week, and we talked about it earlier, right? Who knows if what they really showed, right? What they're really looking to do. How did they get all the backups in there? That wouldn't surprise me from a service academy, right?
Right.
I didn't see a single play of that game. I'm not watching the game film of that. I hope none of you are either. But would it shock you if they got a lot of backups in? And so that's why the model's like, oh, they didn't look that efficient. All it's going to take is a little, and all of a sudden, like I said, the model already thinks this game is going to get to 60. Like I said, it wouldn't surprise me if it gets even higher than that, which goes to your point. I would be shocked if we can get a 52. If we can get it, love it. But really, the fact that we get the win on 55, 56 actually
Yeah,
was divisible by
in this game.
7 numbers.
Yeah, in this game.
And service academy numbers divisible by 7 numbers become infinitely
Yeah.
more key because they don't
Yeah.
kick field goals half the time. They just go for fourth downs, and
Yeah.
the other team knows that and they go for more fourth downs, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
But that win on 58, all these different possible key numbers there in the 50s makes it really appealing. And then our last After Dark game, wrapping us up here, 10:30 p.m. Eastern. The one I hope to be asleep for because I didn't get enough sleep on this last Saturday. I got to do a better job this week of resting up and not staying up too late, right? So I hope to not see a single play of this game. Under 44 A grade play. Model projects 36.5 in Minnesota, California. Minnesota really leading the charge with regards to a certain style of play that they have become known for, Cousin Jared. Cal doesn't really seem like they want to fight that. At this point, Minnesota, you just kind of got to play their under, I feel like, every game of the year until the market just really catches up and just say, we're going to go like 9-3. And that's going to be good enough, right? That's kind of how I'm viewing this Minnesota team until I start seeing ridiculous number on the total.
Yeah. Just for the record, we'll acknowledge it. Minnesota beat Northwestern State last week 66-0. It was 59-0 at halftime. Northwestern State had 42 yards of offense for the whole game. I think they may have had a running clock in the second half. It was very bad, but even with that, it was, I don't want to say misleading. There was a defensive touchdown in that game. Northwestern State had like 3 turnovers on their side of the field, a lot of short fields for Minnesota. But yes, to your point though, we saw Minnesota earlier in the season. It was the week 1 where we had the under in their game with Buffalo. That was an easy winner. This one feels...
who racked up a grand total of 151 yards. So it's not like it's just Northwestern State can't move the ball against them.
Definitely. You might ask yourself, should I be concerned about Cal? And Jaron Kiawe Sagapulutele, who is the freshman quarterback for Cal, has looked really good so far. But that's been against, Oregon State, who we've talked about previously, and Texas Southern. This will be his first game.
And that Cal-Oregon State game late got steamed on Cal. I mean, all the money in the world seemingly coming on Cal and looking dead on.
Yeah. Minnesota, completely different realm of defense than what this Cal team has seen so far. You might look at Cal and say, oh, they've been solid offensively. Minnesota scored 66 points last week. That's just, don't like a Gus Malzahn offense. Don't get distracted by the window dressing. All the motions and shifts and everything, it's just to affect your eyes. At the end of the day, it's going to be a power run. And this is what this game's going to be. It's going to be a defensive slugfest. Don't get carried away by what you've seen from these teams so far this season. It's going to be a low-scoring, grinded-out game.
There was something happening in the Minnesota Northwestern State game with regards to clock because the total time of possession adds up to 53 minutes and 45 seconds. We have a missing 6 minutes and 15 seconds that I assume was the running clock portion of it that you mentioned, but they dominated the time of possession against Northwestern State. Throw that out. Who cares?
Yeah.
Let's go back to the Buffalo game. Time of possession, 38.5 minutes to 21.5.
Wow.
And that's what they'll do.
Yeah.
They'll just control the ball and just, pound and pound and pound. And then they'll throw the ball. They threw the ball 35 times against Buffalo, but it's a lot of short passes.
Yep.
It's not like they're throwing deep. 35 pass attempts, and that was against Buffalo and 290 yards because it's not, USC goes out there and has 35 pass attempts, and that's like 600 yards.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And that's not what this Minnesota team is. It's short passes, it's safe passes because they're trying to ground and pound. Their leading rusher in that first game had 30 carries in a game that was not ever really in doubt, and he still got the rock 30 times. In the game last week against Northwestern State, they had a different leading rusher who carried the ball 20 times. So they're wanting to ground and pound. The pass game, short passes. They want to control that clock. They want passes over the middle of the field. I guess it doesn't really matter now with the running clock. But they want these short, safe passes. They don't want incompletions. They want to keep that clock running. They want to really wear out the other defense. They want to keep their defense rested. And that's going to make it hard for Cal to score, move the ball, because that Minnesota defense is good, and when it's rested, they don't give up a lot of yards. You saw it, of course, against Northwestern State, who had a whopping 42 yards, but against Buffalo only having 151. Is just, and Buffalo's not a bad MAC team.
No.
Cal's better, but again, like I said, I think we're just going to take the under in a lot of these Minnesota games until they get ridiculous, and then once they do, we'll reconsider. But until then, let's just roll with it. Cousin Jared, that is the end of the show. We've gone, I don't even know how long, another hour and a half.
2
with
hours.
All of our 20 picks, I believe, on show. We've got more picks over on Patreon, more A grades. If anybody's still watching, Cousin Jared, any last thing to say?
Join us over on Patreon. You can read everything that I've been writing. Football season's just getting started. It's a long season. Still got plenty of time to join us and get plenty of value for your dollar.
Yeah, absolutely. Very well said. Folks, that's all for our show here. Like, subscribe, tell your friends. Join us on Patreon, either the free or the paid, either one. We really appreciate you if you're already there with us, supporting us, helping me pay the groceries so I can continue to do this full time. So again, thank you so much for your support if you are over there. Otherwise, again, just as a reminder, folks, we're going to win a lot of bets. We're going to lose a lot of bets, but the right mindset and the right model, as long as you got both of those, folks, you can win more when you win than you lose when you lose.